Hi, my name is Jim Hedrick, AKA Mr. Jim. So we all know the Trail to First Class program down there. Well, that was born nationwide right at Camp Cornhusker, and that was the brainchild of John Irwin. And the first year or two they did it down there, I think the curriculum, the goals were the same, but they staffed it with, 15, 16-year-old kids. And for 15, 16-year-old kids to keep, it's just like at a troop meeting here, to keep things under control. And then John sort of took it over, and not that he did all the teaching, but that's when he asked for scoutmasters to come and sort of be a patrol dad for each group and to help run a little bit of law and order and keep them on task. But that first summer, it was back when Dave Van Horn's patrol started with the troop, and Larry Bechtel's troop patrol started with the troop. And they went like us adult leaders do. We go to the class and observe, and they came back that first night and said, "Hey, it's a disaster." But instead of really complaining to management about it, what we did, we knew what the curriculum was. We did it in our campsite. I taught axemanship and fire building and, that type of stuff. And they all, we all took turns teaching something at the Trail to First Class, Troop 16 style. And it worked. And our philosophy, at least what I think our philosophy has been down through the years, back in my day when they used to have scout leaders meetings every morning, and basically it was excuse this term, bitch session. And it wasn't any fun to go to, just to hear people complain. And we always had the attitude of, if you got a complaint, you got two choices. One, to endure it, or two, to help come up with a different idea. And that's the way we did it all at camp. And we, kept, I don't know if you got familiar with Jeff Johnson, but he ran the COPE course the last 2-3 years down at camp. Well, he was a youth, an older youth, like high school on up. He was a member of Troop 30. And when he was a kid on camp staff, especially as he got to have more responsibility, he was program director one year. And like I said, it went through a period of time where leaders' meetings were nothing more than a bitch session with no solutions. And when Jeff would get fed up with the way things were, after supper, he would come out to Troop 16 just to relieve himself of all his worries and to have fun. He says, because you guys were always doing something. You guys were always having fun. The lashing where and shoot, I had them, 15-foot spars and the cross member with the Indian walk or whatever.
Walking A-frames.
Yeah, and came up with that. And we would go over to Odo because of a big open field, and we had fire building contests and everything. I remember one year John was making kettle corn, and he would be dumping it in a paper sack and handing it to the boys, and John couldn't keep it filled, before the next batch was done popping, the sack was back empty. But, we always had something. And then I've always been blessed with a lot of good leaders. I mean, most of them, Dave and John and Larry. But each night in our campsite, a different adult would be in charge of what I call snackage, our midnight snack. And that could be anything from fritters to popcorn to whatever they chose. And they would come to camp prepared, and their night would come along. And then back in the day, there was a sweat lodge. At one time at camp, they had like an Indian lure class. It wasn't a merit badge or anything, but it met in the trees back behind the campfire circle area. And it was close enough to the creek. They had a sweat lodge down by the lake, and they would, you get all sweaty, then they would go jump in the lake afterwards. Well, we thought that was a cool idea, and this was, oh man, I can't tell you the year for sure, but I'm going to say early 80s, maybe a little bit later. But we were in, what's the campsite just south or north of Osage? Mandan, not Mandan, Kiowa. Okay. And we were in that campsite for 2 or 3, 4 years. And we made our first sweat lodge, was just basically a tripod with a tarp around it and a few rocks and a little bit of water. And I didn't have, I maybe had 16 boys or something at the time. So not everybody went in there. And then when we started going to Osage, we got a little bit more sophisticated. We had a metal milk carton case, like our cases that we have in the trailer, but these were metal. And then I'd had the rocks in there. And what we did, the patrol that was going to use the sweat lodge, they gathered the firewood to make the fire to heat the rocks. The older scouts, and I had a whole patrol of what I called back then the leadership corps of older boys, they got to go in every night or any night they wanted to. But the only patrol other than that, because we made it bigger to where we could sit 10 people in there. And I'd be on the outside, and back in the day, we used to have coffee cans for fire buckets at all the tents. Well, we'd gather them up and have them right outside, and then when they'd come out, you dump a bucket of water on yourself. Well, Woody would go in every night, and he was sort of the timer and the peacekeeper, and we did it at dark o'clock, which was after curfew most of the time. And they had to be quiet even when they dumped cold water on them. And then they would go to bed and sleep like a baby. And chigger bites just disappeared. Your pores would open up from that sweat, and then the cold water hit it, it just spit out anything dirty on your body. And we did that for quite a few years.